All right. So today I wanted to get into a bit of a explanation, I guess, about sort of the actual utility of LLMs, because I think that there are some misunderstandings and misconceptions about large language models still, what they can and can't do. And especially I also want to talk about sort of the evolution of these things, because you might be surprised to know that it's not that new of a technology. Now, if you go back I can really only go back personally to 2017 because that's when I started getting into AI research. But there's basically a subfield of AI research called natural language processing, or NLP for short. And this was basically everything to do with using words in AI models, right? Now, these couldn't even be classified as LLMs at this point. Still, we're talking about things that could do very small and simple tasks, like identify the parts of speech in a sentence, or give a sort of a Boolean, like a positive or negative response, whether something, for like the sentiment of a sentence or paragraph, right? Like, is this a positive sentence or is this a negative sentence, right? So they had these, different natural language processing tools that come in. Now, around this time, actually, as well, is when the Transformer came out. So the Transformer is really the sort of breakthrough that led to what we've got now with these big large language models, right? So there's a white paper called "Attention is All You Need," and it went through the technical sort of explanation of how this whole process works. Now, so between that paper and today, we have seen an increasing amount of focus, energy, resources being directed towards large language model development. And the process was really interesting to watch still. Now, when they released these like sort of pre-transformers, natural language processing AI models to do, the different sort of small things, I was able to put some of these things together. Like, okay, we got basic sentiment analysis, we got the parts of speech recognition, and then I would combine that with other things like, fuzzy matching, decision trees, and what have you. And, in 2017, I could make a rudimentary chatbot, right? It would go through a process where a user would input a message, my system would analyze that message, run it through these tools, run it through a database that I'd created, and then and output a message back to the user that hopefully was somewhat relevant. Around that time, I was also experimenting with connecting it with data sources like Wikipedia and Facebook. So you could do stuff even back then, but it was a slog. It was very hard work. It was, and the results were not great. Let's just say. Now, when we finally got our hands on GPT-2, okay, so this was, for me, like a very early light bulb moment, because we could see the promise in these things in terms of, new applications that were coming to the forefront. Now, at that time, it was slow to run because, I think probably at that, well, for me personally anyways, I didn't really understand about requiring the GPU optimization at that point in time. So I was running it on a CPU, and I was like, what the hell? Like, this takes like half an hour to generate like a, page of text or something, right? But still, it could generate a page of text. And after having worked on chatbots that didn't have transformers, that was wild, right? Like, it's like, wow, okay, where are we going with this, right? So, I mean, that was early stage. You couldn't direct it to do stuff. It was very difficult, to like quote unquote prompt it. which wasn't really even a thing at that point still. We were just really thinking about it as inputs and outputs. But that was definitely a big step forward because that was open source and, you know, people like me could use it. So let's fast forward to 2021. So in 2021, I joined the private beta test for the OpenAI's GPT-3 API. So we got access to that, and that was like, oh, this thing's starting to get good now, right? Now, at that point in time, OpenAI had a bunch of different models. I'd say like 3/4 of their models were basically really similar to sort of the old NLP tools, right? They were small, good for doing small tasks, stuff like that. They weren't, smart or anything, right? But they had these, the GPT-3 models. They're called the Da Vinci models, right? So we start with Da Vinci 1. And I mean, this was capable of writing basic documents, right? So at that time, we were using these models for creating market analysis reports of crypto assets, right? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., etc. Now, that worked all right. Still, we would have a script that would run every day. It would go through the top 100 assets on CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap, and put together a sort of a report. They weren't particularly good at this point, but they were automated. It didn't require us to have an analyst or a person writing, and it was pretty cool. It was a good start, but at the same time, like I was saying, it was, nothing compared to what you've got now, obviously, right? So remember I said there was a Da Vinci 1 model that we started with, right, for GPT-3, and that was sort of the best model. And over the next 2 years, between 2021 and 2023, they would release 2 more models. They would release Da Vinci 2 and Da Vinci 3. By the time we got to Da Vinci 3, which is like a month before ChatGPT got released, or maybe even just a few weeks, I remember testing that model, and I started testing it on generating code, because they had some other specifically code trained models called Codex. They were not impressive, but the Da Vinci 3 model was still, because it was like writing pretty decent Python and pretty decent JavaScript, right? I was like, oh, Nelly, this is useful. So I did a big chunk of research for about 6 weeks around that time. And basically my worldview changed entirely still. I became convinced at that point that, things now are not the same as they were before they're going to be, or whatever, I try to do the, okay, never mind. Basically, like, things that this was a big change. This was a big change. This was like electricity or the internet or something, right? And I remember telling people, and there was so much skepticism that came through at that point too, right? Like, I mean, I'd talk to colleagues and partners and stuff, and people were not convinced, because they were, and I guess maybe this has to do with just basic human psychology, but they were looking at the mistakes more than anything else, right? Like, or the imperfections, or the lack of abilities, rather than the potential, right? To see where it's going. And I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I'm always looking at potential, and seeing where things could go. So yeah, sometimes maybe people think that I'm overreacting, or I'm over ambitious, or overestimating things, but not this time. Not this time. I was right. I was right. So fast forward 2 years to now, and you can all see exactly where all this played out. But 2 years ago, that wasn't super duper evident for the average guy, right? People were, I guess, a little bit after that Da Vinci 3 model came out, then ChatGPT, the first version of that, came out, right? And that was, obviously, definitely a huge marketing thing, and got a lot of attention into LLMs, and then started this mad sort of like scramble of everyone like trying to build services around it and build apps around it. And yeah, I was one of them. One of the first things that I did after that research period was try and do an AI startup for like SEO content development. And yeah, it didn't work out for other reasons. It wasn't necessarily for the anything to do with the AI models. It was, doing a startup and creating businesses has a lot of other challenges, right? And also, I would say because of my optimism, I started trying to lean on the LLMs to do the things that I knew it could, but it was not quite good enough to do it in the way that I wanted it to at that point in time still. So that led to some frustrations, delays, slowdowns type of things, right? However, the progress never stopped, right? And I knew it wouldn't, and it kept going. And we could see now that we've sort of reached this inflection point. The quality of the models that are available is insane. Oh my gosh, I can't even skip to today without talking about Llama. So Llama, when that started, was huge still, because you have to remember that, when at the very beginning, all of these things were commercial access, right? Like I had early access to GPT-4 API, and that was like, ooh, that was like an exclusive thing. It was hard to get, right? Not everybody had that. It didn't last for very long, a few months, but still, right? But the point is that there was sort of this assumption that a lot of the AI stuffs were going to be closed off, restricted, kept behind walled gardens, right? And then Llama threw that on its head completely still when it got open source, right? And it started out as a quote unquote leak of the first Llama. And well, I guess we'll never really know what happened there, if it was intentional or if it really was accidental. I mean, the way that they did it was pretty funny. It was like, an error in a git commit or something. They accidentally left a torrent hash in there. So, so yeah, I mean, when Llama came out, that was like, oh, now I can run these models on my local, right? And by this time we'd figured out about GPU and stuff like that. And these things had RLHF training. So RLHF is reinforcement learning with human feedback. And this layer is really what separated sort of the progress in LLMs. So let's say before RLHF, there had been attempts to create very, very large, 500 billion parameter large language models that were not very good. Because they kept following this same process of just dumping data en masse, right? But with RLHF, there was a format to the data, and that format was in a question and answer format, right? And as we went forward, we realized that the models didn't need to be so big. They just needed to have this better formatted data, right? And this led to further developments, like conversational agents and reasoning agents, right? So you could create now, again, the quality of those initial Llama models was decent, but nothing compared to what we've got today now with the open source model. So the open source community around large language models and AI in general has exploded. So I remember going to Hugging Face back in 2018, 2019, around then. It was just the GPT-2 sort of downloads and, some other small models and things like that. And, not really anybody knew about this still. I mean, it was definitely not sort of a common knowledge, I guess, that there was a silly website called Hugging Face that had AI stuff in it, right? With the logo of a, emoji giving you a hug. Just to this day, I find adorable. But now, I mean, there are over over 1 million. I think it's approaching 2 million different models of models, data sets, things like that. Everything related to AI on there. So I mean, it is a absolute household name in terms of AI development. You would lose your AI street cred if you didn't know what Hugging Face was at this point in time. And it's an incredible resource, really is, because there's so much you can do with it. And again, this is open and accessible. It's not behind a closed wall garden. It's not on somebody else's server. You can run it yourself. You can do whatever you want with it, right? And this has led to all kinds of crazy, awesome things happening. So we had Llama, the development of open source AI, other AI labs coming out, doing great stuff. And now we're at here. So it's 2025. The commercial models are incredible. We have audio, we have video, we have, speech, we have, voice in, we have vision in and out. We have image segmentation and classification. It's like really, really high quality. We have video generators that can create, text and people that look real, and CGI that would have cost millions. Is absolutely phenomenal, the place that we're at right now. But none of this would have happened without all of the work that happened before that. I mean, like I said, I can only speak personally from about 2017. But before then, I mean, you had these guys working in labs, working in academic settings that were really doing a lot of that foundational work. So we definitely owe a debt of gratitude to these guys. As they say, we always are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And that's, never been more true than today with all of this technology. And there's a lot of giants out there who came before us. That being said, the future is very, very interesting with all this stuff. So yeah, go ahead, go out there, take advantage of these tools, create something amazing. Use the big commercial models for stuff, use the open source models for stuff. Enjoy this, man, because these things are a gift. They are bringing us all kinds of like new ways to do things, all these new ways to make our lives and our businesses more productive, and be able to do things that used to take us weeks or months, or used to be just completely impossible, out of reach. And now you can knock that out in an afternoon, right? So yeah, that's sort of a brief history of natural language processing, large language models, from then until now. So hope you enjoy that, and we'll see you in the next one.